Hi guys, welcome to today's video. We've got a special guest. We've got Adam Holt from AssetMap. He is the CEO of AssetMap, and we're going to be talking today about gourmet food truck financial planning. You might be thinking, well, what in God's name does a gourmet food truck have to do with financial planning? And we're going to talk a little bit about that now in 2 seconds. Hi Adam, how you doing? Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, nice, happy to be here.
Nice to see you. So obviously we're going to delve a little bit into the gourmet food truck side of things and how that applies to financial planning. Maybe you could tell everybody just a little bit about yourself and your background there with AssetMap. I know you're a CFP by training, but maybe tell everybody how you got involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So I joke these days that I'm a recovering CFP. I've been in the business for 22 years, I guess, maybe 23 years now, as a financial professional here in the States, on the East Coast. And, I came into the business like many people, starting to work in the insurance side, realized I wanted to do investments, then realized I wanted to be a planner, then realized I wanted to be a financial coach. And you know how these evolve over time, you realize where your skills and your desires to educate are. So I built a practice actually with 2 mentors, turned out to be about 25 people, now managing about $1.5 billion. I gave up my managing role about 5 years ago, to really run AssetMap. AssetMap is a process that we created and built our firm around to visualize what's going on in people's lives. So we took the complexity of all the things that they were dealing with, wealthy, not wealthy, business, trusts, offshore, and literally, get it onto one visual page where we can talk constructively about structure, tax, legal, investment, insurance, why people were doing what they were doing. So this process literally went viral in the States about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's now used by thousands of professionals around the world, multiple currencies, to basically do the front end of planning. So that's what I'm doing these days. It's been an exciting ride.
So you're a very unique being in that you started out as a CFP, as you say, recovering CFP, but now you've actually moved across to the software side of things. This is kind of an unusual path to end up in software. I'm sure there's not many others like you in the industry, particularly, is there?
That's right. No, well, there's a couple of us. I think most of us realize that our business and financial advice is well more profitable than being a technologist. But I think like anything in this world, I was very blessed to have a lot of success in financial services, and so this was an opportunity for me to give back and also teach. So I spend all my time, Paul, helping other advisors elevate their practice.
I totally see that. So can you give me an idea? I mean, you built quite a substantial practice before even getting into the software side of things. Can you give us an idea of maybe some of the challenges of when you were building that practice? I'm sure certain things worked really well, but I'm sure certain things didn't work so well at all. Can you give us an idea of a few of those?
Well, challenge-wise, as we all deal with it, right? You've got this marketing front end that you got to figure out. Are you a referral-only shop? Are you gonna spend your time investing in marketing and doing newsletters and content development and network? Thankfully, we designed our firm around this idea that one of us was an exceptional networker. That's all he does. We want him on the golf course or at charitable events all the time. That's his job. Another one is a fantastic golfer, and he literally uses that as an attraction strategy here in the States. 2 of us are very technical closers, so we knew our skills. We kind of run the firm and are really the kind of, we'll call them the core competency of technical execution. And then we had dedicated teams for investments and service and so forth and people. And I think one of the bigger challenges, as you can imagine, as it grows, is making sure that you have the right specialists in the right spaces. On the technology side, it's always been a challenge. We found that the simpler, the better. We are a bit gadget heads in that we love these technology tools, but we also were honest about the fact that very few of those tools actually got used. They sat on the shelf, like in our garage, right? I've got all these great power tools that I never use, but I've got them, right? And I pay for them, probably insuring them too. And they're gathering dust, right? They're basically becoming less usable over time because they're actually dating themselves. But, occasionally we use some of these more analytical tools for portfolio or for estates or tax, but But the reality is that we really spent 80-90% of our time in our AssetMap environment because we just want to talk about what intentionality. So I think the bigger challenge I'm seeing with a lot of the firms I deal with is how to piece together that technology today, right? Which ones are really essential, right? Is CRM essential? Financial planning is likely essential, portfolio management. And of course, we're seeing a whole bunch of ancillary technologies that are great. Some are essential and they're not getting the attention. Some are not really essential. And so I think, the joke about our topic today, and what does this have to do with, gourmet food trucks, is this idea of how do we strip it down, right? How do we get rid of the clutter and then really just pack what we need in our backpack to go on the next journey, which I think we're all now forced to do with COVID.
So can you explain then, on the food truck, so just to be clear, gourmet food truck financial planning, as you say, it's a kind of an interesting analogy. Can you explain what that means?
Well, it's funny. We were talking about this, I guess, a few months ago, you and I, and this analogy just stuck in my head. And I really see it, and I want to share that with everybody because here in the States, a lot of the restaurants that delivered an exceptional product, they were really known for their brand. People were loyal to the restaurant because they loved their food or the people or the process or the environment. When you think about that, it's not unlike financial services practices, right? Clients are working with their financial professional because they trust them. They like the deliverable. They're happy. The food is good enough in the form of performance, right? But there's usually some kind of connection to the, when the pandemic hit the States, a lot of these, restaurants that had, a relatively, we'll call it higher price point, had a challenge, which is that they've got these huge overheads in the form of their infrastructure, their restaurants, but they still need to stay productive. And we saw several of them move to literally almost takeout only or mobile environments where they actually put their restaurant into a truck, right? They bought a food truck, or rented one. And they literally traveled around providing, we'll call it delivery service. So they thinned down their menu, right? They weren't offering, the foie gras wasn't on there, but all of a sudden they're doing, gourmet tacos or cheesesteaks, and they're taking their brand outside because that's how they had to roll with the pandemic. And we have seen a bunch of pop-up, literal, behind the scenes, there's no front end store. There's just a pickup window, and the back end is back there. Clearly a much different price point. And I equate this to the remote movement, right? Many of us were already working remotely. Even though we kept a very nice space, a physical space, 90% of our meetings have been remote, even going to the office for the past 6-7 years. We were very comfortable. A lot of financial professionals now, Paul, as you know, have been pushed to go remote and may not ever go back, or will realize that this is the new hybrid scenario. And I think it's important for us to look at how a food truck, how do you take a restaurant with lots of services, lots of machinery, right? I guess they don't use machinery, they use appliances, right? Rip that down to your greatest value proposition, and then be intentional about what your practice is going to look like going forward. And I think that the food truck concept is really, really viable today because, as we've seen several of our friends like Derek Notman and his entire crew at Connector going and teaching advisors how to go entirely remote and live wherever you want. He actually lived 6 months in a different location. His whole family takes him. I think these are really interesting ideas. So that's where I think it's going.
I love it. And so maybe to give context for our audience, if they want to get lean and fast as financial planners, that's the point here. Let's get them lean and fast. What 3 or 4 things do you think they really need to look at right now?
I honestly think it's no different than what we do for our clients every day. And here's what I mean by that. I have been telling advisors for the past bunch of years that we have to challenge our own clients with what's in their financial closet. Does it fit and is it intentional? Okay. In other words, if we look at your full financial inventory of stuff, does this investment fit? Does it serve us? Does it align with our goals? Does this insurance make sense? Are the reasons we bought it still the reasons we have it, right? This constant question of buy, hold, and sell, right? That's this idea that we shouldn't just be applying that to stocks or equities. We should be applying that to, we see this debt here. Should we get rid of it? We see this, we see this unperforming annuity. Does that make sense for us anywhere? And so the way that we do that is with AssetMap, right? We build this visualization. And I've been very much addicted to this concept, not only professionally, but personally, because I think it shows up in our personal lives, right? We have a lot of stuff we don't need in our personal lives,
right?
Whether it's clothing in my analogy or stuff, maybe it's people.
Tools in your garage. Yeah.
Right? There's maybe a lot of things we could be more intentional about keeping and investing in. But I think until we have the opportunity to actually write out what we have, and then force ourselves to actually question it. So if you were to think about it right now, if you were an advisor and you were to literally just take a piece of paper and write out all the stuff that you have that you're paying for, likely in terms of technology, resources, people, look at your true actual budget and question whether those things really deserve to be on there, whether you could live without them. I think it's a really great start. So the first thing is, like everything, to be honest about what you're actually doing, what you're investing in. There was a great comment, and I can't remember the source of it. You can find it on Google. Someone said, don't tell me what you care about. Show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you care about. The key is that where we might be spending money in places we don't actually care about. And that's the analogy here of the food truck, right? Is, okay, I'm going to take your practice, and I'm going to force you to pack up the entire practice, put it in a bunch of bags and boxes. Yeah. Now move it. Does it fit in the new world? Do you really need it? Yeah. Maybe you can jettison it and invest in, let's say, digital marketing. That same money that you're putting into software and technology and people, you maybe could be putting into something that's going to leverage your business in a different way. And I think this is one of those forced events. Today, I think we need to figure out what we've got, ask ourselves whether it's intentional, and then be specific about how we're going to make changes. Maybe not drastically, but maybe this year we're going to cut some operational expense and we're going to add a marketing expense, right? We're going to be very intentional about this. We're going to get rid of 3 tools. We're going to have 1 tool, and those tools are going to talk to each other. And we're going to do that one thing this year. So anyway, I think advisors know how to do this because they help households do this all the time. But it's time to turn the camera on oneself and say, okay, if I were advising myself, what would I be honestly saying? And that's where, obviously, individuals like yourself and organizations that help make those intentional decisions, because you can't do everything, is, I think, really important.
And how would an advisor, not trip over their shoes, so to speak? Like I see what they should be doing, but what should they not be doing, if you understand what I mean?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about practice management, what they should not be doing is, and I have to think about this actively, it's a great question. I think one of the many challenges I'm seeing is that financial professionals are so desperate to do something new on the technology side. They feel like they have to catch up, and there's a great fear of missing out on the momentum of some of the newer tools that are out there, that they're just going out and grabbing a new tool and saying, oh, I need to have financial planning. I'm going to go buy a financial planning tool. Right. And it's literally, I have plenty of gadgets all over my desk here that I thought were great on the marketing side. Oh, I love that. And I never use it, but it looks cool, I guess. Again, I have that cluttered garage full of great power tools. But I think that's kind of speaking about myself and what I tend to do. In the practice side, I think right now I start to see people jumping into client portals, buying a new CRM, and not spending the time on the training too. In fact, I tend to tell larger companies that whatever you spend on the software, expect to spend twice as much as that on the training. Right. In lots of soft costs as well. But the reason is because if you don't teach people how to use the tool, if you don't invest in the time. So I'm seeing a lot of people buy a tool and then it sits there. They don't know how to use it. Or they buy a CRM and they make a glorified Rolodex, Paul, right? They're not actually using the workflows. They're not doing the automation. They're not doing reporting and tracking. It's like, I got a CRM. Is that good enough? I have a marketing tool, but they don't maximize it. Right. So they don't really achieve the ROI that's possible. They achieve what's doable, right? And I think that's where I think advisors are making a mistake. They really need to focus on a tool, get great at it, get the ROI out of it, squeeze the juice out of the lemon, and then move on to the next tool once they can processize this and once they can delegate it.
Right. And I've heard you say that it's possible to understand a client's complete financial picture in under 1 minute. Okay. And I'm interested to understand how that works. Obviously not just in the US, but internationally. It doesn't really matter where a client is. Maybe someone rings you out of the blue and you can understand them within 1 minute. How does that work?
Well, for us, that was our big challenge. I mean, anytime a client, well, let me take a step back. In my practice, the way that we positioned was that we were holistic advisors. Holistic advisors can't just pull up accounts and talk about performance and fees, allocation, risk profile. That would be theoretically easy because it's a single place for me to go to get that information. It's usually my portfolio management tools. We also did insurance. We helped with estate structure and trusts. We had a tax attorney on staff. We usually helped the entire family. So there were decisions it wasn't just about how's my accounts, it's how are we doing? Are we on track? What's the plan with Bobby, my special needs child? What's the conversation was at a very high elevated place. And so what would typically happen is that if a client called in, before we answered that phone, we needed to get acclimated as to what that whole household looked like, all their financial decisions. And we always found that financial planning tools never cut it because it gave me a balance sheet. Maybe it was up to date, it was aggregated if we were lucky. But it never really talked about the structure of the family and what was going on, what was important. So the design of AssetMap was to try to catalog 5 things that I need to know whenever I talk to anybody.
Right.
Who's involved in your family? Who are the people and entities that are part of this household? I need to know them all. Trusts, that they exist, and those interdependencies. I need to know cash flows coming in, where you're working, what kind of subsistence your family's living on. Where are your assets? Not only what are they, but where are they? Which accounts, what's their values? I need to know about your debts, and I need to know about your insurance policies in play. Now, I don't need to know deep level. I need to know that where they are and that they exist. And so for us, the asset map is literally an X-ray, a financial X-ray of all of that stuff on one page. And of course, I can interpret it in literally a minute. So doing that for me did a couple things. Clearly, when a client reconnected with us for any reason, I instantly know who's involved in their family and I could talk about it competently. I know about what they have that we're responsible for and what they have outside, even if it's in a real estate deal with their brother that they decided to invest in, right? I know all of that stuff and I can talk about it like I really am aware. And that was huge for getting confidence builder within the client because the clients say, Adam knows what's going on in my family. The second thing it does is it actually helps us uncover where there are holes, all right? So if you look at an X-ray, typically of your own skeleton, right? If something's bothering you and it's obvious, there's going to be a broken bone. You can see the break in an X-ray. But what's often more valuable is when you see something that people don't know what to see. For example, it's that when the doctor can look at the X-ray and say, here's the broken bone, but here's the dark spot we need to address. Most people miss the unobvious look at their financial well-being, and a financial professional can see this instantly. For example, I see that you have this life cover. It should be in trust to avoid the taxation. Why is it not in trust? Well, making that change just saved that client 30, 40%, depending on your jurisdiction. I can't save 30, 40% of whatever that large number is by just tweaking something else. So the key is that sometimes a professional needs to be able to acclimate on the bigger picture instantly to make sure that somebody's asking the right questions, right? And so that's the key. That's what we've been trying to address. We've been successfully addressing for over 1 million people, which is amazing, at AssetMap. And I think it's going to set a new standard.
I absolutely think it's setting a new standard, and it's really because you make it very simple. And for me, the best tool is generally the simplest tool, the easiest to use, the one that's the easiest to implement and kind of get on with, basically, you know, and that seems to be how AssetMap works, which is brilliant. So on that, and on tools, and we've talked a bit about tools, and obviously we know there's new tech happening all the time. And as you said earlier, advisors are, you know, taking on this tool and they should be dropping that tool, and they've got too many things and they don't talk to each other and all that sort of stuff. So what tools do you actually love to use? And it doesn't have to be, you know, financial planning tools, just tools in general. What tools do you really like and like to recommend to people?
So what tools do I like to use in terms of technology? You're talking about specific names or types of tools?
Either or, whatever makes the most sense for you.
We created something to try to answer this question, and I'm not sure, I would challenge everybody to go check it out. It's called Compass. It was you can find it at assetmap.com/compass. It is literally a map of all of the different technologies that we see practice probably should consider or have. There's a core set of technology, and then there's what I would call value adds or practice multipliers.
Right.
And that core set has typically been CRM, financial planning, and portfolio management. Those three are the critical pieces for everybody, and they should talk to each other, right? In an ideal world, they should talk. If nothing else talks, they should talk. But we have been seeing some newer entrants into those categories. Client engagement tools, digital profilers, how do you collect information from clients? We think that's really essential these days. We focus a lot on that at AssetMap. Risk communication and portfolio, we'll call it education, right? Why are you changing the allocation? These are starting to become greater in their preeminence. Digital applications and straight through processing are also, we are saying, moving into that core from the outside. But some of the tech that I really love and I think is going to become more essential are even more scrappier tools. Like, how do I take all the knowledge in my head and get it into a documented, auditable format for a client? And so I really love mobile dictation. I think that Mobile Assistant does this really well. I use it on my phone. I dictate, at the end of a meeting, I dictate 3 minutes of just my brain dump, and it gets all moved to text by a human transcriptionist and pushed into my CRM, and then all of the automation goes in there now. So the key is getting right.
Beautiful. So, what a time saver.
Well, the problem is I will not write 3 minutes worth of notes, and so my assistant is going to say, can you walk me through this? I don't know what you're talking about. And so I think they've done a great job, and a lot of people haven't experienced this because I think they've done a great job at Mobile Assistant, and it's all US transcriptionist. So they actually, a human is writing it as opposed to a Siri interpreting curse words out of what you say. So, so it's professionally done. Other tools that I really have liked in the field, I think that if you take something complicated and make it simple, I think that's great. I think Riskalyze in the States has done a great job of this. Because they've been able to communicate the risk, the range of risk scores that a client has, and we actually love them so much that we put them right on the AssetMap, so you can show a risk profile and a client profile in the same experience visually. Brilliant. Other tools that I think do a great job. I think the CRM is critical, but the CRM has to be easy, because a lot of us are inclined to say, I want to buy the most complex CRM, and it could do these great workflows, Paul, and boy, it could wash your bathrooms if you let it. But the challenge is setup, and most advisors won't spend the time and the money on getting customized setup, and so therefore it sits, it's like the Range Rover, when you live in the city, you're never going to use that tool that for its intent.
90% of the frills literally never get used.
Beautiful car.
Beautiful car.
Looks great, all clean. Okay, but it's
in
not
case you
intentional.
needed to drive
Yeah.
into the bushes one day, you know.
Right, just in case. Right.
Yeah.
It's true.
I like it. And listen, some of those tools are absolutely brilliant. Let me challenge you a little bit. And you know, you've had a very interesting career in that you trained as a CFP. You know, you started relatively young into the career. You know, I remember you telling me that you had some challenges, you know, in the early stages because you were young. You know, you were in your 20s and trying to talk to people about, you know, being, you know, financial plans and that side of things. But if you had to literally start from scratch tomorrow as an advisor, right? And you've talked a bit about some of the tools and so on, but what way would you approach that? How would you go about it? How would you look to get your early momentum? What kind of initiatives would you do to get some clients in the door?
Well, I think like any marketing, you want to be able to solve a need that many people have that is a real motivator,
right,
for them to take action now. Great thing about our business is that we don't have an inventory. We don't have to have a high overhead cost of manufacturing or a storefront or delivering that anymore. So our business is great because whether you're in the product distribution or you're in the advice and experience monetization, in other words, you just charge a fee, which is challenging when you're young, right? You don't necessarily have that advice or credibility. You're probably going to start on the product side, which means that you're charging something for managing a product, insurance, annuity, pension, whatever it is, investment. And if you're getting into the business today, I think that I would personally tend to focus on planning, solving the need for answering the question, or how are you going to manage anxiety in retirement?
Right.
What? How are you going to manage anxiety? Yeah. I'm not asking you how you're going to distribute, how you're going to make sure it's the most efficient. I'm basically saying, what is your anxiety about retirement? Can you manage it? Now, that isn't a very evolved, we'll call it thinking for financial planning, but it really talks to the real issue that most of us have, which is, how do I make sure that I have a later life, financial life, that gives me certainty and security, and basically allows me to live the vision that I have, at least, of what I would like to have happen, even if it's maybe not perfect. And I think that trying to address the real emotional challenge through financial planning is where we need to get to. I think people are finally willing and open enough to be vulnerable about the real underlying issues, which is, I don't know how I'm going to not outlive my assets, or I don't know how to make it work. How do I know what to take from this account or that account? Like, we could blow it. So I think helping people on the distribution planning is going to be the biggest opportunity, because nobody knows how to actually distribute well in a low interest rate environment. So for the next 10 to 20 years, the massive demographic, certainly in the States and in Europe, I think argue that distribution planning is going to be the biggest unknown, and I would focus on that. I think there's a great opportunity for us to start positioning holistically. I think that financial advisors should be talking about tax. They should be talking about legal. And I think we're going to also see a greater independence, a gig-like economy, in the sense that financial planners are going to be one member of that gig, that they should ideally build a team, independent, or if you have them in your own firm, specialists that serve a client's collective needs, and they should all be talking. So when you think about the big frustration of our technology is what? I enter data into this system, and then I have to re-enter it here.
Disaster.
And I'm doing double entry or triple entry, and it's annoying. And so you know what's going to probably happen? I'm just not going to use this tool because I'm not double entering. And you realize you can get by just on this tool. The point is that this is the same thing that happens in financial advice. Households basically talk to one financial professional, and then they have to talk to their accountant, and then they may have an attorney, and then maybe they have a trustee, or maybe their child is involved in a business or whatever it is. And they have to tell them all different things all the time. I think we're moving towards this concept where there's one key person, finally. And that person has to have the facility to distribute information and collect it from these other parties. And that's what I think is the vision of financial advice on the future. Can we set ourselves up to promote that and lead with advice? or are we going to be waiting for and following somebody else who creates that model? And I think it's an interesting opportunity. That is what I would create today, because I think the full economy is set up to now do this, where we can all be distributed multiple countries, multiple expertise. I'm going to piece together your dream team. So that squad is going to work on your behalf, but I'm going to manage them. And I can charge for that because that's a clear value proposition for being the head of that team, the captain.
And what would you do? I mean, I totally get the model of, having the key person and tying all the key bits together, but what would you do to attract the clients? What would be your positioning or your marketing that you would focus on? Again, if you were kind of starting from scratch with, no Rolodex and maybe not as much knowledge as you have now,
Yeah, well, you probably know very well, and we've learned this, I would say more recently, that the digital marketing, growth hacking, these types of words have been really obscure to most financial professionals, right? We are people to people networking. We work off referrals. People trust us. Maybe we met them at some event. That's typically how we've all grown our business. Sometimes it starts with family and kind of migrates. If you survive the business, right? If you can get through those first 4 or 5 years. But today there's no substitute. In fact, it actually looks strange if you don't have a presence digitally, if you don't have content out there that promotes your ability to contribute to the greater ecosystem of data. In other words, are you writing? Are you showing people your expertise? Because there's no other way for you to profile it, right? I can't put you on a billboard and expect that that's going to work. It doesn't. You might look good, but that's not good enough for attracting people who want a technically competent advisor now. I mean, when you think about it, I don't go to Amazon. When I go to Amazon, I already know what I want to buy, right? I'm not looking there to shop. I'm actually going there to shop pricing and execute. I think people have gotten to this place where they kind of know they want investments, they want advice, they want insurance. Now they're in the shop mode, and they're comparing you publicly in the domain of this ecosystem we call the internet, basically saying, okay, this person, I like their website, it looks more credible, they've got more content, they're talking about the topics I care about. I've read a couple of their blogs, I checked some reviews, I searched them. There's huge digital reputation management that's happening behind the scenes. We're all doing it, right? I mean, we don't buy anything without maybe contrasting it in couple sites, unless I'm just desperate or I already know where to go because someone told me to go there. I think so. What advisors need to do, and I want you to pay attention to this if you're listening, you must be able to manage your digital reputation. Now, that reputation is either intentional or it's unintentional. The default is unintentional, which means it is whatever it is, but it lives forever and it's accessible by everybody. So I would say what we need to do is we need to be intentional about how we want to be viewed. Are we writing content on a specific niche or niche? Are we going to be known as an expertise in something? Are we a generalist? If we're a generalist, are we competing on price or on ease of doing business, right? So that has to be very clear in terms of what persona we're putting out there for people to find us and be attracted to us. It is a long game, right? It is not a short win. It's a commitment over time to create a digital reputation. But that thought leadership, I think, is essential today. And a lot of advisors are lost on this. I'm glad your company, I know, is working on issues around this, whether it's through social media or other even paid media, I think today is really interesting. So I think that's something we all need to do a better job at really cultivating.
One of the things we kind of laugh about a little bit in our business is an average advisor, whether they're new or whether they've been in the industry for 20 years, they put up a LinkedIn profile, and a lot of the time it kind of reads like their resume or their CV, which is fine, but nobody really cares about what you were doing 20 years ago or what role you were working in. They really only care about whether you understand their problems and challenges. That's all they care about. And if you can show that, whether it's through your profile or your website or whatever, that's when they're going to sit up and pay attention. I always say to people, have a 2 to 6 second window of attention, so they'll look, and if they don't see something that engages them or switches them on, they're gone. They hit the back button and off they go. We're all fighting against it. It's kind of funny.
But that's a great point that you make, Paul, because in a sense, the LinkedIn has taken over on the professional world for social media validation. I want to see where you went to school, if you went to school, your accreditations, maybe even you might inadvertently see recommendations on there now, if your organizations allow it or for regulatory. You're going to see what you care about, what you follow, right? So we shouldn't be dismissive of this, right? People are looking at this even subliminally, picking up, oh, I see that you're involved in the charity that helps greyhounds that need to be placed. I actually love dogs. Oh, I see you're a dog lover. So these kinds of connections, when we don't have the opportunity to talk about it in an event, actually can be the motivation for somebody to already feel an affinity towards you, but we didn't think to make that public facing. So I think the key is financial advisors in creating a digital reputation have to intentionally tell people what they care about and who they're aligned with, because there are people looking for people like us. And when they find us, that can make the difference, right? So having a complete profile is a start. But how do I get to know you as a person? I should be easily able to then, from that, find other content you've written or see a video where you're talking about what you care about and how you deliver your process, because it will start to humanize that approachability between a consumer of advice or investments or whatever it might be, and the person they want to get to, which hopefully is you. So I think we need to invest in this.
No, absolutely. And listen, and thank you for being so open with us today, and talking a lot about the future of the model and the future of tech. I think that's brilliant, and you're quite uniquely positioned because you obviously CFP, but you very much sit on the software side of things now to kind of see what's happening on both sides of the industry. But maybe back to our food truck analogy, and I really like how you're sort of essentially sort of poking people into being leaner and faster as financial planners. It's kind of happening naturally because of the virtual movement, because of the pandemic, and people can't meet face to face. There's a certain amount of natural elements to it, but as you say, people need to be more intentional about it and more deliberate about it, and they need to be actually really planning out how they could do that and how they could use the food truck. And we've seen the restaurants do it. If you told me 12 months ago or 2 years ago that the restaurants, the really fancy restaurants, would all be out in food trucks, I'd be like, no way. But I think we've all sort of seen that happen. So just before we jump on, anything else to add on that, or anything else you think people should be thinking about on the food truck side of things?
I think that, so look, the reality is that sometimes major calamities force us to take action that's transformative. When I was a kid, we had a full basement of all kinds of memorabilia and crap that my family had kept for years and so forth, and it was stuff. And we had a big flood and it wiped out the entire basement. We were forced to throw it out. And you know what we found? We had a huge basement and we had all this opportunity to use space, right? The same thing is true is happening here with the analogy you just spoke of with the food trucks, is that they might find actually brand new business models that they never thought were possible, because they're forced to make a decision. I think the remote movement is forcing people to recognize, hey, wait, I may not need an oak covered wall conference room that cost me, $20,000 US a year. So I think the challenge here is to use this opportunity to actually question what you're doing today. If you're listening to this and thinking, how do I apply this? The first stage is going to be just literally write down everything you're doing right now. Just write it all down. If you can put a cost or a value to it, do that, right? Write what that is costing you a year or what you've got invested in it. And then ask yourself, are you going to buy, hold, or sell this? Okay. Are you intentionally going to keep this because it serves you and you know what the return is on your practice? Or do you see things that are clearly missing, like digital marketing? And it needs to be there and it needs resources, and you've got to put time and attention into it. There's no substitute for investing, whether it's your money or whether it's your time or whether it's delegating somebody else's time to go focus on it. The key is these are becoming table stake questions today. And if you're not running lean, then you're basically throwing money out the door. You have to intentionally say, yes, I know I'm doing that, or just leak money, which is really just not great business strategy. So that's the challenge I would make to everybody.
I love it. And if people wanted to get in touch with you or, find out more about AssetMap, obviously we'll put some links in the show notes. Is there anywhere specifically you would send them?
Well, absolutely. You can clearly go to LinkedIn. You can search me on Google, Adam Holt, or search AssetMap. I'm sure you'll find plenty because we have been intentional about our digital reputation. You'll see how that plays out. But certainly, yeah, please feel free to reach out to me on either way or follow us on LinkedIn. But we're happy to talk to anybody who really cares about this and of course, continue to grow our network. So thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Adam. Thanks very much for your time today.
Bye, Paul. Have a good one.